Hello everyone, welcome to the Pacific Hermitage live stream, and I'm Ajahn Chinda. Good to see some of you who are on. Well, there's not too much changing around here. It's just as I seem to mention, sort of Groundhog Day, and it's an interesting experience. Just being around the same two monks every day, and then the typical day we do. The other two monks are on alms round, and then just preparing food, eating it, going back to our kutis. The other two monks are doing puja. I'm on my own. I've been doing a lot of solitary practice. And it's the same thing. My alarm goes off every morning, same time, 2:56. And I made a determination that if I wasn't standing up within 4 minutes of that, then I would have to go to puja. That was my punishment. I just really enjoy the solitude, especially in the morning. So, interestingly enough, that's quite, or I should say consequence rather than punishment. But anyway, it's quite a good consequence, because it's been very rare that I've actually gone to puja. I kind of know I have to get up, and just one thing I have to say about that is just the enjoyment one can have, just sort of like as soon as you get into a rhythm and a habit, and it's just like that, it's so enjoyable just getting up. There's not much arguing with the mind, because that's what's done in the morning, and then just starting the day. So yeah, I'm very grateful, very appreciative of so many people who help support my practice and the other monks' practice, and our ability to live here in a hermitage situation, to have a very simple life, 5 days a week going out for on bindabat and alms round, receiving food from our locals who live in White Salmon, and just how lovely it is. I don't know if I could imagine anything more easeful and wonderful and pleasant in life. And yet, of course, the mind does have interests. It isn't always kind of satisfied with with things, and especially I see that in the meditation during this winter retreat. No matter how many times I sit down, it's like this first question that was stated, and that was with Rick saying, this feeling of discontentment arises, that there's a sense that it's not, there's like some hole that's always needing to be like filled, some sort of void, and how that's just part of, I'm guessing, most of our experiences, and that's it's just fairly normal, and yet we wish. I think there is a tendency to wish that it wasn't that way, which is just the same exact thing again. To want it to be different. This is where craving is born, where the basic sense of my sense of what dukkha actually is discontent. And so, welcome to samsara. That's what it's about. But also there's so much beauty, as I was mentioning, just the appreciation, the gratitude one can have for living a life that is aiming to really penetrate this problem that's presented to us, that we have a pervasive sense of discontent if we examine our lives closely, and yet there are times when we feel content, so we know what that feels like and what that's like, and yet we yearn for more of it when we have it, so we kind of aren't satisfied with it when it appears. But I think that practicing with discontent is a lifetime. It's a lifetime endeavor, and it is a very subtle problem, dukkha. It can be very subtle. We can just walk into a room and have a shiver and wish that it was warmer. It can be just about anything. And like I said, it's not like our lives are always filled with dissatisfaction. But it's often the case that when we have satisfaction, when we have happiness, it's very hard to sometimes, not for all of us, but for some of us, for myself, I can speak for myself, just to be content with that happiness, content with what we have, content with the fact that during a meditation it can feel frustrating that the mind is either too constricted or too wild or too it's not focused or whatever it might be. And that's part of our practice. Our practice is actually to reveal that, to understand that, and it shouldn't ever be. When we're setting up conditions in our mind so that there will be a place that me somewhere else happy, some place, some experience, some time when I will no longer have to practice, I will no longer have to endeavor or push myself or learn. I don't want to have to learn. Just somebody just tell me what to do and I'll get it. There is no helpful way that one sets up a condition and then realizes that condition. It's that whole sense of setting up the condition that's the problem in the first place. So that also doesn't mean that we're accepting of our circumstances, that we just say, well, whatever it is, I'll just accept whatever it is. So if I have a mind filled with greed, then I'll just be greedy. Or if I have a mind filled with aversion and hate, I'll just be aversive and hateful. So there's also a doing, and this is, how the Buddha's discourses are so many, and just filled with doing around, what do we really do about this? How do we kind of muster the strength and the intelligence to sort of mount a defense against Mara's armies, and it's like it can feel often that we're going to be defeated or it's overwhelming. There's no way that we could possibly win. But the point isn't to win. The point is, again, to learn, to understand, to keep endeavoring, and to be willing to fail and make mistakes. Because when we're upset that we're not able to do something, then we're setting ourselves up into a position where we don't feel we can make mistakes. We can't fail. And the only way we're going to learn, as I've said so many times before, is just by failing again and again. So that's why I think it's really helpful to try to view mistakes and failures as things that are welcoming, that are teaching you. And it's also important to set ourselves up as our own teachers. This is a very important part of the practice. You have some teachers talk about having like multiple selves in the mind, and so we want to find the wise selves. We want to find the wise voices. We want to set ourselves up or find the selves that are willing to listen, the students, but also we want to find those that are like the most sane, have the best intentions, and they're in there. They're in there. And how to talk about this as if it's not like a situation where we're talking about something like multiple personalities, although that can possibly seem what it's like, as in like a psychological disorder, but it's more of a sense that sometimes we're really greedy And we're identifying with that, and we're becoming that, and that's who we are, and that's how we have a sense of who I am. I'm a really greedy person. Sometimes we're really spiteful of someone, and we can't stand them, and there's no greed involved, or craving, or delight. There's just like, I wish I wasn't around this person, or I wish they didn't exist. And so that's who we become. That's who we are. That's how we identify. I'm such a hateful person. And so these selves just keep arising and passing, arising and passing. And yet, for many of us, it's very easy to identify with particular selves, the ones we're used to. And sometimes we quash those quieter voices that we are not used to listening to, like those wise teachers, the selves that know what to do and are interested in learning and helping and trying something new. So that's another thing that can be a problem in meditation, is we just keep, hitting a nail with a screwdriver instead of a hammer, or hitting a screw with a hammer. We don't try something new, like, oh, maybe if I used a screwdriver with this screw, then and I turned it, that would do something in the mind. So we're also wanting to try out different things, and that's why the Buddha had so many different potentials, so many ways to teach ourselves, to teach our minds to overcome this dukkha. So, those are just a few words to get things going, and appreciate all of you here coming to the live stream. And I think in terms of continuing to answer Rick's question, I don't think I think that many people can identify with that. Rick asked a question right in the beginning in the live chat that though I've made progress in other areas, I typically feel what I do have accomplished, etc., is not enough. So this isn't just like in meditation. This is just in general. It's not enough. How can we develop contentment when we feel driven to acquire more than our basic needs? One of the ways that monks and nuns deal with this is we reflect on the requisites. So we just, we see, okay, well, can I just use my my robe for the purpose of warding off cold or heat, or protection against insects or wind, or also modesty. I'm just trying to be modest, not walking around scantily clad, well covered. So these are some of the things. It's just like, oh, can I just be content with this robe? And interestingly enough, as monastics, we have just basic things, but we can sure proliferate about those things. And I know exactly what that's like. I've had that going on for myself this week around something that I've had for a while, and I had to return because it was broken and it was under warranty, and I tried to return it. And as many of you know, if you've ever tried to do that, it's not always the easiest thing. And I could see how attached I was because things weren't working out, and it was taking longer and longer, and the communications were getting more cryptic, and unsatisfactory was the basic word I would describe the experience with. And it hasn't quite turned out. It's been over a month, never got the thing back, but I did have a person come in and rescue and just said, we're just going to send you a new one. In fact, we're not just sending you a new one, we're going to send you the whole package of the item. And I was like, wow, that's great, but it's still not here. But in my mind, there was just a lot of proliferation, a lot of kind of obsessive thinking, and how can one be so entertained by the same story over and over again? I don't know. And it's a wonder. I would come out of a meditation sometimes, and I would think, there's just not that much time left to think about these things. We don't have that much time. And I think about, like, if I am on a deathbed someday, instead of just spontaneously dying, or when I'm walking or whatever, hit by a car. But if I do happen to die, I don't want those thoughts, my last thoughts, to be, wow, I really wasted a lot of time talking to those customer service agents, or whatever it might be. And so, just one of the ways, what I'm trying to get at is actually trying to draw a boundary around our own minds and our tendencies. And so, one is when something like that comes up, if I'm just discontent with a situation like that, it's just like, no, I'm not going there. So I have to actually, I've used this metaphor a lot, like with you're like a dog it just wants to go and it's not tamed. It just is pulling and pulling and pulling, and no, you're not going there. I'm not going to this thought again and again. Now I will go to the thought, but I don't then notice that I'm going to it, and then I'll just think about it for a few more minutes. It's just a constant kind of cutting away. It's a relinquishment of that. We can do that the same as I was saying with like our robes. Like I might be dissatisfied with my robe. I say, oh, it's kind of old. I mean, there's no major holes in it, but the fabric's kind of getting weak. I mean, or maybe I'm not satisfied with the color, whatever it might be. Then I start thinking maybe I'll make a new robe, or look in stores, see if there's one there, whatever it might be. And yeah, that's kind of that's just kind of like how we can work with it, is that no, I'm not going to ask for new. I'm going to sew a couple more patches on this robe, or I'm gonna, I'll just be fine with it. There are no holes in it. I'm fine. What am I? Sometimes there's no reason. We just want something new. We're interested in something new. We do this with people. We do this with all kinds of things. And so our training is to just be taming our mind. And it's not in the things that are actually going to give us contentment. It's not in like, finding like that one thing that will actually, it will make me feel better if I get a robe. And then you get it, and then the same habit is there to go searching for another one when that same discontentment, that dissatisfaction comes up. Same for food. I mean, food is a huge one for monastics. It's a huge one for anybody, probably, because it's so basic. But yet we elaborate on it so much. And how do we stop elaborating on it? Is we try to make things more simple, or eat less, or like one of the things that's worked for me is just often monks and nuns tend to be so well fed, and especially in a larger monastery, there's like 20, 30 dishes. There's like so many choices, and just to say, okay, I'm just gonna have 5. I'm just gonna take from 5 dishes, and the mind's like, what? No way, I want that. Or there's gonna be some item that the mind says, oh, that's my favorite thing. It's just this automatic, I really like that, or I haven't seen that in a while, or whatever it is. And then just, no, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to take that. And so, and if you do that every day, then, you might be thinking that, oh, you're never going to have this one favorite thing. Well, no, your favorite thing changes all the time. So you'll have something even more favorite the next day, and that thing that you wanted the other day, you decided not to have is there. So it's not like that, but it's around more like you set a boundary for yourself. And so that's where, when that boundary is set, then that contentment arises, because it's like, oh yeah, I can be content with just 5 dishes or 4 dishes or 3. Although the less dishes you take, the more you will eventually take of that one dish or something, and then nobody else gets it. So it's good to also be a bit pragmatic. People see you taking a lot of X. I'm not going to actually say something, but and then there's none left for them. So yeah, we're also pragmatic in what we do. We have to be aware of our health, what we need. If we're cold all the time, we're not wearing enough clothes, we got to deal with that. We need to actually pay attention to it's not an idealistic, this is not an ideal that we're setting up. This is just a real, like, what do I need? What can I get by with? And then contentment arises because, oh yeah, I don't need more than that. I've been experimenting a little, but not a lot. I'd like to do it more with just very cold showers. And I thought it would be kind of easy to get used to, and it does get better, but it's hard to do something like that, because you want just a nice warm shower. And then I wouldn't say this for myself. I still take warm showers, but I know monks who they just kind of move into that, or that's just what they only take cold showers from then on, and I mean, very cold showers. And you just get used to it. You get content. I remember there was a story in the that I read about where there's some children that have over recorded history, and it's not, I think maybe 300-400 year history of recordings of these accounts, not very many of them, where somehow a child has been left in the wild and it's grown up in the wild and it survived. So it was, like it was adopted by some animals or whatever, or when it went into the wild at 3 or 4 or 5, it actually somehow figured out how to survive and did, but it lost its capacity for learning speech. And the few children that that tried to reintegrate into society again have had a very difficult time. But I remember one thing about one of these children was that they had absolutely no notion around being in very cold weather, or just freezing cold water, or taking baths in cold water, anything like that. There was just no question as to whether that was abnormal, that there was something wrong with that or something more comfortable than that. That's just what was. So it's often that we are setting up our own conditions, and these conditions can get higher and higher in terms of like our needs can get more and more elaborate, just because we of what we essentially are used to. And if we keep experiencing discontent and wanting to get used to more and more and more, then we're going to have the nicest showers, the warmest showers, whatever it is. So just imagining, like, how is it possible that a human being can get conditioned to actually living in such austere conditions that there's no question that's just how one lives? Maybe they just didn't even like warm, some like warm bath or very warm conditions or clothes or whatever it might be. So we're, also just to have a sense of that in terms of content. So I'm seeing other questions. I think gone in that direction for a while, but developing contentment is really observing discontent and then saying, am I okay with this? You watch the discontent, you watch the sense of like, I'm not okay with this. You say, well, how can I make myself okay? Can I just, again, take those 5 dishes and see if like am I starving? Is there a problem here? What I find is there's a release. There's a sense of like relief and like, finally, like I didn't give in to the desire, and it feels really good. It feels that there's some strength and power that has been brought up in that situation, and that, like, as the Buddha talks about a lot, like one has overcome Mara's snare, the trap of Mara that says, you really do need more, and you've proven to yourself you don't. So I see from Kanti, how about being very averse to the place where you live and you can't leave? How to accept it? No wise voices coming about it. Yes, this is true. There is. I mean, there's some situations where one can be in an abusive situation. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that that's where you're coming from, but there are situations where it's not, I wouldn't say that that's the same kind of discontent when one actually finds something that's unhealthy, unhelpful, problematic, not meeting basic needs, and encroaching on sort of our ability to even have happiness in our life. In those situations, we can practice with discontent, but we also need to put in the conditions to change that if we can, and not everybody can. So we're we're acknowledging also the fact that there are limitations, but if there are things that we can change that we have identified are just basically causing us problems in our life, like being with somebody who is abusive, or being with somebody who is always given to wrong speech, divisive speech, or, whatever that might be, or just any kind of situation that we can actually do something about. We have to use our own wisdom really to understand, like, well, is this something that I can be patient with and deal with, or is this something that's harming my own sense of well-being? This external condition is actually harming my well-being. And so if we have that answer that's like, no, this is actually harmful, I'm finding it hard to live in this type of situation or this place, then yeah, if you can't leave, then I guess if there's really no way out, then one has to deal with that. And according to the Buddhist teachings, there is a possibility to transcend a situation like that, but it can be very very difficult if one's own ability to kind of live with basic needs of shelter and food, but even just like kindness, if you're just in a situation where there's no kindness, that can be very demeaning to our own experience, and very hard to get out of. In that kind of situation, Kanti, I just want to say that you can't leave the place where you live. So, yeah, you have to make it, if you really truly can't leave, you have to make it livable. And the question I would say is there no experience of happiness ever? Or are there some times when there's some contentment, there's some happiness that arises? If you can't find those, then I would kind of go to also what I'm suggesting about watching this sense of discontent, this sense of aversion, and just as you watch it, you will see it change, you will see it arise, you'll see it pass, you will see it morph into different places in the body, you will see it morph into different ways in the mind, and that's really that sense of impermanence that we're trying to gain insight into. So just by observing that, you say, oh, it's sort of like that aversion one experiences in the mind. You could liken that to like pain in the body. First it's here, then it's there, and we're just saying, I'm painful all the time. I feel pain all the time, but it's not the case. It's like, well, actually you feel pain in different parts of your body, but even not thinking of the body in that way, that there are parts, pain is just a manifestation of change. It's changing all the time if we're willing to look at it. And so aversion in the mind would be the same way. First it's like this, then it's like that. And just trying to, I would say, really look at those experiences of aversion and trying to see where, like, is it something that you're helping to create in certain ways, you're fostering, or is it something that you can kind of take a keen interest in, watch as it changes, as it mutates? Are there places you can find in your own mind, just as you can in one's own body usually, where there is a pleasant experience, where you are feeling pleasantness in the body, pleasantness in your mind? That's what often I would encourage when people are saying they have extreme pain when they're meditating. It's like, well, find some place in the body where that's not, it might be painful, but it's not as painful as that experience you're having when your attention is drawn to it. So if I'm like experiencing a lot of pain in my lower back, I would focus on my upper back, not my lower back. So those are just some suggestions I'd have in terms of trying to develop a way to deal with a situation, that is untenable or difficult to get out of. JML says, I don't really have much equanimity, but I can act like I do. Even if it seems to be beneficial. Is this partial equanimity or something else? Are there other things one can fake? Well, this JML comes from the uh, fake it till you make it approach, I think. And I think it's a very wise approach sometimes. I mean, if I'm a person who's really tired in the morning and I don't want to get up and I just want to sleep, I just want to fake that I'm a really wakeful person and get up at the same time and just get up and go for it. And no, I'm not a tired person. I'm awake and I'm going to do this. And, you know, you try to create a situation or a way that you are, or, you know, like that whole idea of faking something. I know you're talking about equanimity in this case, but it's more like there is a way of trying to create in your own mind conditions that aren't there. And I'd say that's different than acting. So acting would be like acting like you're equanimous. You know, somebody's talking to you and you feel enraged and you're just, you know, that's going to have a certain effect on you that might be beneficial. You're not reacting to that rage. But yeah, I do think, like, for example, smiling makes people usually feel happier than if they're frowning. You know, if you want to say all these terrible things about somebody, but you don't, you just say nice things about them. You find nice things to say, even though you don't believe them, or not that you don't believe them, but that's not what's coming to mind. But you do find true things to say that are kind or nice. You'll see that actually does change the mind. So I would say, yes, I do think that if you act like you're equanimous, hopefully that will have a effect on your feeling of equanimity. But yeah, it's not the same. If it's kind of a development rather than, I would say, what true equanimity is. I wouldn't even necessarily say partial equanimity. I mean, there's sort of equanimity of the body and behavior and action, and there's equanimity of the mind, right? So equanimity of the mind is like nothing's perturbing you. So we could say that someone is in the jhanas, they have perfect equanimity, or actually the fourth jhana. So that's what pervades the mind, is equanimity. Nothing is disturbing one in that state, is what that means. But from my understanding, but the when you have the more equanimity in action and speech and kind of like everyday, you know, thinking, that would be just, you know, like you're doing your best not to be perturbed. You're doing your best to stay kind of balanced, to not react, to be non-reactive. So responding, but not being reactive. So, you know, it's not this, you have a pause in between. You have something there, a buffer that's helping you to see. So there's kind of two equanimities going on. And I think if one's acting like it to try to produce it, that's good. If one's trying to act equanimous, to look equanimous, that's not a very good way of trying to go about it. So I would just be trying to be aware of that. Luke, hopefully that helps. Yeah, there are a lot of other things, by the way, JML, you can fake, but just make sure that if you're faking it till you make it, you're doing it in a way that is beneficial, truthful, honest, helpful. You're seeing the benefit in the mind. So I remember a while ago there was a popular TED talk that I saw about a woman, and it's quite beautiful. It's one of the most popular TED talks, and in it she suggests fake it till you make it. She's talking about how different body postures can actually produce different effects in the brain around how people behave. And she told her own life story about how she just felt inadequate her whole life. And, you know, she's a Harvard graduate. And she had a teacher who believed in her. And she told her teacher early on, I can't remember exactly the story, but she's like, yeah, I can't do this. I think she was going to graduate school, and I think she went to Harvard. Can't remember. And then, but it was one of those very, very, one of the Ivy League schools, top tier schools. And and I'm pretty sure it was Harvard. And she just said, I can't do this. I can't. She was in class or something, and I think she was being asked to be called on, or as a graduate student, and she just said she can't do it. So she was telling the teacher who advocated for her, I'm going to quit, I'm leaving. And the teacher said, no, you're not. And she said, and basically she told her, you need to fake being a great student. And she said, you're not going to want to get up and say anything, but you are going to get up and say something. You aren't going to want to do this and that, and you are going to do it anyway. You're going to think you're going to write terrible papers, but you're going to write great papers. You're going to keep writing, whatever it was. And she did it. And then she described very beautifully at the end of the story that the same thing happened to one of her students, and she gave the student the same thing. So this doesn't mean that we're lying. This is a very different thing than lying. This is, I'm going to try to shift my behaviors in a way that actually is doing something I don't believe that I'm able to do, but I'm doing it. I'm trying it. I'm trying to put it on, even though I don't feel that way. So yeah, I think I would advocate for that, as long as one is being honest with oneself, that you're trying to do something that you don't feel is present in you, and you're trying to bring it forth. So Luke, some people I know follow the Wim Hof method for cold showers and breathing, etc. I did it once and nearly passed out. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's some of the monks. I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is the Wim Hof method. But I mean, I just did this the other day. Like, I don't think this is any special behavior or anything, but that I've found. But when I do a particular type of breathing, I get very hot. So the other day I was actually quite cold in my kuti, and we have heaters in our kuti, so don't worry about that. And so I just started doing this type of breathing, and all of a sudden I realized I was quite warm. I was actually sweating, when before I was quite cold. And so these are real things you can experiment with, and but they don't necessarily lead to enlightenment. They don't. Just because one has an ability to breathe in a particular way, and I'm not doing anything magical. I mean, Wim Hof, for example, is just a normal guy who discovered a breathing method. But yeah, it doesn't. That's the thing, is we can get interested in all kinds of things that happen to us in our bodies and minds, and fascinated by them, but they don't necessarily lead to non-suffering. But they can, something like that can help. I do think that being able to sustain oneself in very cold water, again, it does work on contentment, but it has all kinds of health benefits too. And it's just something that one can also help to use in certain situations as well. Scott wrote, I struggle with modern society's conception of mental health and illness. Everything arises based on causes and conditions, and distress is part of the human condition. It seems that society feels safer with the belief that some are ill and some are not. What would the Buddha say? I have no idea what the Buddha would say. But I can guess that like the Buddha was very much against sort of setting up conditions against other conditions, or sort of like trying to define our suffering with particular boundaries, or in terms of saying like some people are permanently like this or permanently like that, or they have a condition that is permanent within them. Or defining somebody as like, this is their identity. They have a personality disorder, or they have Tourette's, or they have whatever, you name it. And so that's a person with, what was it somebody said to me about, when one doesn't have any pigment in the skin, there used to be a word, albino. They are an albino, and now the way that it's described is it is a person with albinism, which both kind of are. Yeah, I mean, I guess that, so they're a person who just has this trait in them, which is better. But also, just they're just a person that appears differently right now. Next life, they might have a different appearance. So definitely, I think that when we talk about certain beings have good mental health and others bad mental health, it's just too kind of black and white. The distinction is just too much. Like it's like here or there. It's one or the other, and it's often just a very gray thing. It's more like has so many nuances. What it means to be have mental health that is either good or not good, or mental illness. In a sense, we're all mentally ill, right? Until one has realized arahantship, everybody's mentally ill. So we can at least have a sense of familiarity, or being part of one family, of one big mentally ill family of the human species in samsara. So that's probably more what I would kind of think the Buddha would say in that regard, is that it's just another self, it's just another condition trying to come up with a definition for what one is or what one suffers from. The Buddha did tend to stay away from typology, like to say like he is a greedy type, or he is a da-da-da, or discussing people in that way. We can say that this is a person who experiences more greed than aversion. But that changes, doesn't it? So, good to mistrust, I think, the concept of mental health in certain areas. That's true. But in other ways, sometimes it can help. Diagnoses box people in, but sometimes they can give some insight. It just depends on the situation and the person. And, always to understand that it's changing. So it's not something that is solid. After years of meeting with others in person, right? What are skillful ways to maintain a solo practice using primarily online teachers while having limited contact with local friends? Yeah, I guess that's a little bit, well, that's pretty common these days. I think that one of the things that I'm hearing from other people who aren't going out as much is that, and having like a sangha that they sit with, local friends, local sangha, is that people are finding local friends sangha, not teachers, online. Kalyanamitta online, so spiritual friends online. So I think that's really helpful. Is there's a group that sits, I think, before this discussion on Tuesday evenings, and some of them might be on right now. So that's just something I would suggest is to also see if you can find some spiritual friends online if you're going to have a solo practice, because you do need kind of a mirror more than just a mirror in your apartment. You need a mirror from another person to actually see and say like, oh, hey, what are you working on this week? What are you doing? Oh, it sounds like you're really upset. Oh, I didn't notice that, huh? We need each other to help us see clearly. Sometimes it's very easy sometimes to spot the problems for other people, but it's harder to spot our own problems. This is I can't remember the name for it, but there is a name for that way of thinking. It's something bias. I can't remember what it is. Okay. I've heard you can act your way into right thinking, but you can't think your way into right acting. No, I don't think that's true. I think you can think your way into right acting. Doing that all the time. If I say I really want to be generous today, I'm going to think, okay, today, like when I walk in, I'm gonna say something nice to both of the monks. As soon as I walk in, I'm gonna, instead of being grumpy or grumbling about something, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna notice something positive. I'm gonna say that to them. So I'm thinking that way. I'm trying to produce thoughts of benevolence or kindness, caring, and then that's carrying into my actions. And you can, I think, vice versa. You can also act a particular way, as we were talking about, fake it till you make it. So Linda apparently likes that quote, but I think you can think your way into right action. And if you're talking about unwholesome thinking, like proliferation, sure, but there's a lot of wholesome thoughts that will carry into your actions. Holly, do you use a particular breathing technique when sloth and torpor take over in one meditation to rise out of grogginess? Yes, I will answer that in one sec, Holly. Just want to see what Andre says. I have a question regarding right livelihood. How do you cope with a job that is not necessarily harmful to sentient beings, but is somewhat unbeneficial, like entertainment and news? Thanks. Great question. So the Buddha actually talked to some actors about this. I think there were a couple of times he talked to actors, but there's one in particular where an actor said, "Where is my destination? I think I'm going to." I think he described it as the heaven of laughter. He was like a comedic actor or whatever, or whatever, and the Buddha was saying, "Don't ask me that." But then if you ask the Buddha 3 times, he's compelled to answer. So he said, "Don't ask me," and then the 3rd time he said, "Okay." Actually, if by acting you're encouraging people towards greed, hatred, and delusion, towards passion and and desire or aversion, you can think of all these like violent movies, or just delusion, just confusion. Actually, you're going to be in the hell of laughter. That's you're going to be reborn in the hell realm of laughter, where everybody's laughing at you for a very long time. And yeah, not to talk about hell in that way as like that's like a that was the Buddha talking to this specific actor, but I think one needs to have the best intentions one can when one knows what kind of livelihood one's involved in. And so if you can inject, instead of greed, generosity, being, trying to subdue selfishness and to encourage people towards giving and dana in your job, try to kind of bring that in some way, or to reduce aversion or the production of that. Maybe you change departments or something, or whatever it is. It's sort of like over a long period of time, if that's what we produce in our entire life is like entertainment and news, and it is leading towards greed, hatred, and delusion. Yeah, I think that's tough karma. Not in terms of like, I'm guessing what the vipaka is, like what the results will be for you. But for myself, I could see that, I'm very much drawn towards things like movies or entertainment or things like that. And I see the benefit when I don't partake in them. And yet they have a very addictive quality. And I can see that that's quite unfortunate. It's sort of like I'm being fed a drug. But it is my choice if I pay attention to something like that. But somebody's also giving that to me. And in the way that our own psychologies work, we're interested in it. We want it. We're interested. We have to have this particular taste or this view, or like there's so many things are so compelling these days. It's really easy to get people addicted to something. I mean, the screens that we pay attention to, it's very hard to say no. I don't know if drugs are really needed anymore. You have the internet. So I would just try to see what you can do. Um, I, I liken that to what a veterinarian decided to do with when people came um, to put their dogs down to euthanize, and she was a Buddhist, and she was part of a practice with other vets, and so she said, "Oh, I don't do that." I don't think she said go to him, go to this other vet, or go to her. She'll put your dog down. I think she just said, "Oh, I don't do that." So to the people that came to her, she might also offer alternatives. I've been talking to people a lot about this. Like, what about pain medication for your dog? I mean, often people want to put an animal down because it's their own suffering they're wanting to put down. They don't want to see their dog or cat or whatever it might be suffer, and they think they're suffering, or they have evidence for it, and it might be true. But is there something else you can do? Can you give your animal medication? Can you also kind of know that this is what animals do? They die. Humans die as well. It doesn't have to be annihilation. And when you are making a choice for another being, you think you are making the choice that they want, but we don't know that unless we can communicate with them. And most of us can't directly do that. So I like what she did. Is she decided, okay, well, I'm gonna maintain being a vet, but I'm not going to continue to put animals down. So I just wanted to get to Holly's question about breathing technique when sloth and torpor takes over one's meditation. So I think one of the things that I try to do with that is, like I will try to experiment with a difference between a long and short breath. So I think what I do when I'm feeling torpor, a couple of things I do. The first thing is, I'll open my eyes and test out, like, because sometimes you don't know, you're kind of in this haze. So you're sort of like, you're not quite sure that because it feels a little bit pleasant. Maybe you're just kind of like, oh, this is sort of pleasant, but you should kind of wise up to that and know, like, oh, this is actually drowsiness. It's not pleasantness. So one thing I like to do is open my eyes. And if in open my eyes, I can't just say to myself, no, that it's okay to keep my eyes open in this moment. And I'm instead being like, just rather shut my eyes. That's a clear indication that you're feeling torpor. So you first have to know that you're feeling it. So when you're feeling torpor, some people can be nodding, they just aren't paying attention to the fact that they're nodding. They don't even know that they're doing it. Other people can see them. You could even take video of them. They don't know that they're doing it. Ajahn Amaro has a famous story about that, where he totally denied to this other monk that he was falling asleep. And the other monk says, "You're completely falling asleep." And he said, "Next time I'm going to shine a flashlight in your face." He said this to Ajahn Amaro. Ajahn Amaro said, "Fine, I'm not falling asleep meditation." And so it starts meditating, and all of a sudden there's this flashlight in his face. And Ajahn Amaro's head is down by his knees. And he didn't know that. This is not now. This is many years ago when he was a very junior monk. So it was funny, you think about this, like complete denial, and then there's this flashlight shining in your face, and your head is down by your knees. So you have to know that you're experiencing torpor. That's the first thing. The second thing is, try to do different things. The Buddha has different recommendations. Open your eyes, kind of stare at light. You can do things like bringing up suttas. You can kind of chant internally in your mind. You can do all sorts of stuff. He recommends pulling on your ears. I sometimes will, when I'm alone, I'll kind of tap my forehead. But in terms of trying to wake oneself up to generate energy, I find that what I'm often doing is kind of lilting in my breath. So when I breathe out, the muscles as I breathe in, there's a very energetic quality of breathing in. But when I breathe out and I'm tired, it's just like the muscles completely relax, and it's like this. And so long out breathing, so deliberately breathing out long, not like don't make yourself pass out from lack of oxygen or whatever, but just deliberately a longer breath and then a shorter breath in. So it's maybe like 3 times, 4 times as long. And I find that that's helpful. Experiment with the breathing in that way to see if there's something that will get you to wake up. Now, I want to also advocate this to anybody who is falling asleep in meditation. Another way you can deal with this is you do the 3 nods and you're out rule. So as soon as you find that you are actually nodding, this is a habit. So you want to break if you're a nodder. And as soon as you find that you're nodding, you could be nodding because you're genuinely tired. So the Buddha had all these techniques to determine whether that was true. He said, try this, 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 and this. I think they're the 7. You can look them up in the suttas. It's in the Majjhima. 7 ways for subduing sloth and torpor. And anyway, I try to do it, if I'm being honest with myself. Okay, I nod once. Oh, that was a nod. I count that. I try to really be aware. Okay, I've counted that. Nod again. It's a full nod. I've nodded. 3rd nod, I stand up. Now, in a Dhamma hall filled with other people, you have to be kind of careful. That's not always acceptable, but you can try to stand up maybe and walk to the side of the room or wherever it is. For the monks, we have to actually be aware of like whether we're standing over some senior monk who's next to us, and we're not supposed to be doing that. So you just walk to the other side of the room or somewhere off to the side. And that really does change things. Changing your posture is quite helpful. If standing, you're kind of still drowsy, then go walk. It's very hard to fall asleep while you're walking. Some people have probably done it, but I've never done it. Well, maybe once. I didn't fall asleep, but my eyes were closing, and so that's what I would try out, is like try to really be honest with yourself, because there's a pleasantness around sloth and torpor, and there's something for some people that can be very pleasant, just dozing off, and this can be a very bad habit that one just gets into and doesn't change. And I have seen monks do this for years. I've been one who's done that for years, and I try not to do it. I still do it sometimes, but I do try to be more honest with myself. Like, wait a minute, I need to change postures. I need to change what I'm doing. This isn't helpful. Nodding for 10 minutes, nodding for 40 minutes. But and I've seen that some practitioners will do this for years. That's what meditation is. They sit down and they fall asleep. They just nod, 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 nod. I hate to say something very opinionated about that, but basically I think one is not really meditating. One's just falling asleep in meditation. And if you've created that habit in yourself as a meditator, you need to stop, because I don't think liberation is going to come from that. One is caught in one of the 5 hindrances, the hindrance of sloth and torpor, and that is a hindrance that is obstructing. It's a hindrance to the mind. It's obstructing the mind from insight, from jhana, and you need to stop. So I can't emphasize that enough, that if one has a habit of falling asleep, you better know that you're doing it. That's important. But it's also important that you stop doing it. And so you need to try different things so that you're not a person who is falling asleep in meditation for years. That's what meditation is. Because then all you're doing is Silabbata Paramasa. Like, okay, if I just sit in this posture, I'll get enlightened or I'll get peaceful someday. And you get peaceful when you're experiencing sloth and torpor, but you get too peaceful, and that's the problem. So I really would encourage people to try not to try to break this habit as soon as they see it arising, and if they are a person who is given to sloth and torpor, to try to change that habit as soon as you can. There's so many questions going on right now. Let's see. I read that metta is good for sloth and torpor. Sure, metta can be very good. That's true. And it can be, but the Visuddhimagga says it is, and this is the path. So in the Visuddhimagga, be careful, because it's a map, and if you look at a map too long, then you don't actually see the real world. You just see a map. So the Visuddhimagga can be quite helpful for people, but other times it can just be sort of a map, which is just a description of something. But not to knock the Visuddhimagga, it was written after the Buddha's passing, and it's basically a compilation of the commentaries, and Buddhaghosa went through this with many, many students, I believe, and consolidated the commentaries. And so it can be very helpful for certain people. Sumrit, when we are influenced by others to take decisions that increase our sorrow, such as my mentor telling me not to meet a loved one at a time of death, how to deal with blaming them for that bad advice? Okay. So that's a great question. Yeah. So I think in general, it's important to be aware that people have good intentions, and if there is a good intention, and somebody makes a suggestion to you, trying to do something out of that good intention, they're trying to do something for you that's beneficial. I think it's important to remind oneself of that something wasn't. Somebody might have suggested something that was a very poor decision, that was a very poor suggestion that led you to not do something that was helpful or wise. But if you were sure that they had a good intention in that case, you can be aware of not trusting them in the future, or not maybe heeding their advice in the future in all situations, or in certain situations. But also to be aware of that, like, okay, to remind yourself he or she had good intentions. And that's very important to remember. And now, if the person didn't have good intentions, then don't make them your mentor. If they continue to have bad intentions towards you and they're not looking out for you. So I see the main point there is really to try to remind oneself that people do make suggestions a lot to us that might not work for us, and if they're really doing it for our benefit, then that's where forgiveness comes in, and we do our best to try not to blame them, and remind ourselves of that goodness that was there. So that looks like I think I've gotten to all the questions. I did go through sloth and torpor a lot, but that's because I think a lot of people do experience that in meditation. So please also keep that in mind, to look into that for yourselves. And I think that's it. So it was nice talking to you. It was a little bit of a longer talk. And I wish you all well. Have a good week. And if all goes according to plan, I will be here again next Tuesday. And I am being possibly coaxed into a talk with Tan Nisabo and Ajahn Kovalo tomorrow. I think on the Clear Mountain website. And I think they're going to have a YouTube talk. So if you look at the Clear Mountain Monastery YouTube channel, then maybe we'll all be on there. I don't know. I didn't actually quite get it from him, so I hope that works out. You'll figure it out if you want to be there tomorrow night, 6:30 or something like that. Maybe 5:30. I have to look it up. All right. Be well. Have a good week. See you next Tuesday if you are there at 6:30. And and enjoy your practice. And thank you for listening.